So hello and a warm welcome to you all. Thanks so much for joining our podcast. My name is Mark Morley and this is the IT Business Partner Playbook, a new series where I'll be joined every week by business partners and business relationship managers from around the globe. I'll be inviting them to share their ideas and insights in the hope that we can inspire some positive changes in the wider community. Last week we met with Jerry Byrne, who was actually the driver behind this Unrehearsed and Unscripted podcast. And for those who missed that, you can find the video on the Executive Education Online YouTube channel. And I'll share links on my LinkedIn profile page. You can find the audio-only track on Spotify and Amazon. Again, I'll share links to those. Here you'll also find our AI podcast, which includes 4 episodes of some scarily realistic conversation between robots who consider themselves human. This podcast is purely focused on our education leadership series. It's well worth a listen, especially for the business relationship episode. If you need a concise overview of BRM that your executive team can understand, that will be it. So on to today, and I'm delighted to welcome James Rowbotham, a business partner with global experience, but who, like Jeremy, cut his teeth in higher education. So James, can I head over to you just for a brief introduction, and then we can let the good times roll?
Excellent stuff. I certainly hope the good times will roll, Mark. Thanks for having me on. So I did indeed start in the same place that Jeremy did. I started at Sheffield Hallam University. And the way that came about was I was doing my MBA at the time, and I was just coming towards the end actually, and I saw a job advert come out for an IT business partner, and I had supported IT projects in various shapes and forms over the years, and I saw that the bit that I was particularly interested in was the relationship management bit. Like, I sat there thinking, you mean I get to talk to people for like most of the day and do some interesting IT stuff at the same time? And I was definitely the kid at school who on his report got a bit of, James he's interested in the subjects, but he could do with spending less time talking to his buddies and all that kind of stuff. So when I saw that job description, I thought, well, that's me, that's perfection really. And so I applied for the role. And it was a very, very steep learning curve for me initially. I'd never done a computer science degree or anything like that. I barely knew what a server and a database was at a push. And I was there, basically built a BRM function up from scratch with a lady called Fiona Taylor, who I think you probably know, Mark.
Yeah.
Fiona's a big part of the BRM community, and in the end we were independently accredited to ISO standards, and that was a really interesting role. We embedded a voice of the customer report. We ended up doing a BRM satisfaction survey, met with stakeholders across faculties, supporting them delivering IT for the students essentially. So that was my kind of first real BRM role. Got involved with the BRM community then as well, and realised how important that was to basically lean on BRMs who had got plenty of experience before me, lots of good ideas and suggestions and lessons learned as to how to do things. And I think Fiona and I really thrived on that and worked really well together, collaborated very closely. There was only 2 of us to start with, and the rest, as they say, is history. Fast forward 8 years on, I've worked in aerospace and defence. I've worked for a large software organisation as well. So a bit of variety in there, but that was very much my first role, and I'm looking back really thankful that I had the opportunity. The university took a bit of a chance on me, especially with no kind of formal IT background, but the relationship building side of things definitely I felt was my kind of strong point. So it's a bit strange looking back now, but what an experience, and really proud of what we did. I'm still in touch with some colleagues there. Shout out to them if they end up listening.
It's interesting that you didn't have the IT background to start off with, because it's I talk to a lot of people that are applying for BRM roles, and they want to know, I can do this but can't do that. How will that impact me? And it's the people skills has always been considered the soft skill, which people would think, okay, well that's the easy bit. But for me, at least, I consider that the hard bit. And if you're coming into a BRM role, that's the bit that people struggle with. That's the bit that typically IT have historically struggled with. I think that the IT kind of person has been very kind of focused on what they're doing. They've got scripts to follow or to write, but the kind of people interpersonal skills is the bit that they struggle with, even though that's kind of the soft skills. So it's interesting that you come from not from an IT background, but I think that's probably given you a big bonus, a big benefit.
Yeah, that definitely resonates, Mark, for sure. I think the advice I would give to any BRM, regardless of how experienced you are, and I'm sure that this is what BRMs mostly do, is just ask why all the time. I try not to assume anything really, and obviously with no IT background there was lots and lots of how does this work, why are we doing that, what does it, and bless my colleagues in the early days, they were so patient with me. They must have thought, crikey, this chap really talk about in at the deep end. But the thing I find really in common with IT people is that they are super passionate about talking about IT and about fixing problems, finding solutions for things, and not just kind of quick fixes as well. Jeremy on his talk last time round talked about how BRM should be strategic, and BRM best practice teaches you that if you do the BRMP and CBRM courses. And I think most IT professionals that I've worked with, whether it be developers or solution architects or network engineers or whoever, most of them, if not all, are looking at the bigger picture a lot of the time. And it's not just a case of, well, hang on a minute, we fixed this ticket over here, or, this problem was, causing issues for a few weeks. They're always kind of thinking of, well, what can we do better next time? Or what can we put in place to actually this fixes a number of connected problems? And I think that really helps. I think that a lot of people do look at problems through that strategic lens. And I think as a BRM, you've got to really latch onto that. I think that, in terms of that storytelling that comes back, not only from the business, but from your IT colleagues, I do find that mostly people aren't just happy to put a plaster on something and then move on to the next thing. They do like to talk about, well, hang on a minute, if we just took a step back, if we just invested a bit more time, a bit more money, collaborated a bit more across a number of different people, we could actually solve a much bigger problem for the business. And I just think that passion runs through. That's my experience over the kind of the 8 years and the 4 roles that I've done, is that when you really get talking to IT people, they just want to help in as many and as big an impact way that they can. Yeah. And that's what we're here to do, isn't it? As business partners and BRMs, we're there to make the biggest impact we possibly can for the business, deliver as much value, as much ROI, as much improvement in productivity. So yeah, I think that's the kind of the, like you say, I think that's the challenging part, that relationship building side of things, because I think with experience, you get to know the different personality types and how people best respond. The IT bit, in a way, was kind of a little bit easier because I just had to ask questions all the time and try and figure it out and piece it all together. And even today, with all of the kind of pioneering technologies out there, I don't pretend to know anything. I'm learning about AI, but I learned huge amounts about legacy systems that, go back decades and still are propping up organizations with their kind of key processes. So yeah, I think, like you say, Mark, the IT bit is sometimes the easy bit. It might be a little bit scary at first, but I would definitely encourage people who don't have IT experience to try and take that plunge if someone will take a chance on you, because you can learn a lot of those things, and you do have experts working with you to help you along the way. But what you do have to have is that passion for it and that thirst for knowledge and that kind of inquisitive mind and that kind of, basically, don't be embarrassed about asking silly questions. I'm always the one asking the silliest question because, why not? I really don't mind if that ensures that kind of clarity at the end of the day and that gets the business the right solution, then happy days for me, definitely. Yeah.
Well, also, if you don't ask the question and then get it wrong, you're going to look more silly. So it's good to be silly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all been down that path, haven't we, where you think you're delivering the right solution and then 12 months down the line, you sort of check back in and you hand over the finished article and somebody's looking at you kind of going, well, that's definitely not what we're... Oh, and that's the head and hands moment, isn't it? Where we're and BRMs are kind of constantly checking back with the business and validating, look, we may have changed scope over the last few weeks, but are we still kind of aiming for that goal that you ultimately are looking for, that kind of strategic goal? Asking silly questions is probably the thing I would encourage the most, actually. Yeah, definitely.
I found, because when we talk about these IT delivering projects, it's quite easy, and it's been said a lot, you kind of beat up on the IT people because they seem to like hunker down and get on with something, not really think about the end goal. But I think what's probably more likely the case, and what we have seen this, is that they get given something to do and they do it, and like you say, they're passionate and they're currently excited about it and they want to make it the best they can be. But typically business kind of stands off and says, we've given the instruction, let them go and do it, and then let's wait for the result. And I think, especially where there isn't a BRM team or BRM, people involved, that happens. And then when the IT project, or when the project is delivered, that's called an IT project's delivered and it's wrong, that's then assumed to be IT's fault because they delivered the wrong thing. Whereas business been more involved along the process, that wouldn't have happened. So I think it we can be unfair to the IT guys sometimes, that we do leave them to get on with things, and they do need that kind of constant communication.
Absolutely, and I think that's where that kind of collaboration with business partners, BRMs, and business analysts, solution architects, and the business, where that kind of all comes together. Enterprise architects as well, with that kind of overarching view. But I think that kind of constant collaboration and communication and checking in, are we still delivering the right thing? One organisation that I've worked for is Babcock International Group, and one thing that they're incredibly strong at is PMO and prioritisation, and the business partners were heavily involved in prioritising with the business, and we caught up on prioritisation on a weekly basis. So one week an IT person, a techie, might be working on something, dedicating a lot of hours to it, but if the business partner comes along and says to that person, hold fort for a second, I've just checked in with the business and they've said, actually, the topic that was priority 3 last week is now P1. You can stop doing that one and work on the other. And this is the reason why, and this is how it's going to contribute to the bigger picture. I think that's incredibly powerful for IT colleagues, because it means that they've got faith in what they're doing. It means that when they're logging on of a morning or whenever it is, they know that they are working on the most important topic at that moment in time. Yes. And invariably, there's no kind of long gap between kind of that kind of regular update and that regular feedback from the business. And that's certainly something I kind of learned later on in my BRM career, is that if you really want to make a big impact, having that kind of constant prioritization discussion is really important. And sometimes the business don't really want to talk about priority. Sometimes it's just a case of, we've done enough talking, like just get on with it. But actually, it's hugely important making sure you've got that clarity, and then kind of collaborating across the business, maybe into different sectors or different functions, and talking to different business partners. I might have a topic in my area for my business that I think is P1, but then I might talk to another business partner about a completely different topic, but that's going to lean on the same resource. And actually, we might quite quickly find that this is the most important topic, and I kind of have to give way to a business partner. But I think if you go back to your business area, or even better, get the two business areas that are involved together and say, look, folks, we've had this chat. We think that this topic is the most important. We want to kind of get to an amicable agreement about which one it is. Can you help us? Then it's just like, I think, I use that clarity word. I think it's hugely important, involving the business in those decisions. And I think at times, there have been times in my BRM career where I haven't had that clarity, and I haven't been able to bring that clarity back around prioritization. And it's just not a fun place to be. You've got IT colleagues who feel like they're pulled from pillar to post under huge pressure. They might look at their plan and they've got 12 different topics to deliver over the course of the next month or 3 months or however long. But if you're constantly coming back and say, don't worry about that one, you can leave that be, it's totally fine. We might not even get back to it until next year, or we might not do it all together, or it might be a saving or whatever. I think that's hugely powerful for colleagues and helping to kind of achieve that that kind of productivity, that focus. So yeah, that would definitely be some advice I would give to any BRM, as well as constantly checking in on what is the most important thing at that moment in time, and work with your EMO, definitely. Yeah,
and that goes back to what Jeremy was saying on the last one, that because BRMs are always saying, how can we articulate our value? How can we demonstrate what we're doing? And he was saying that one of the things you can do to demonstrate your value is not by what you've done, is what you've prevented. Well, you stop getting into the pipeline because it's just going to cloud things and use up resources and not get the value that you need.
Definitely. I've seen examples where I truly believe, had a business partner or BRM been involved, it could have saved an organisation millions in cash, genuinely. I think that having that, and I've worked in organisations where they've got small BRM teams right the way up to large teams. I think that those organisations that make that investment, and I think BRMs can have short, medium and long-term value. I really do, in terms of return. But I think there have been topics in my experience where either we've saved millions in the long run, or had we been involved even sooner in topics, we might have saved even more money. I genuinely think it's that important. I think that some organisations are so big and complex and with so much going on that it's impossible for any one person to keep on top of it and keep that. If you're headed in that direction strategically, it's almost impossible for one or a few people to kind of keep that alignment and keep you heading at the best possible pace in that direction. And I think that I look back on some mistakes that we've made as an IT organisation or as a business. And I really think that having that kind of BRM insight, that kind of collaboration, that storytelling, that rationale behind why we're doing things. We all do business cases and we all put objectives and high-level requirements, low-level requirements, but actually working with your strategic colleagues, working with your enterprise architects, working with your senior IT leaders, with your C-suite folks as well, I genuinely believe it can save huge amounts of money. I really do. I've never felt more passionately about that, actually. And I think, like you said, Mark, I think going back to some of those, IT people are terrible at celebrating success. Right. I'm completely the opposite. I almost do it ad nauseum. I think people go, all right, okay, enough. We're sick of how, happy you are, James, or the business are. But I think it's hugely important, rather than just going on one thing to the next, what did we really deliver? And if the business are happy about it, for goodness sake, share that back in, within the business or within the IT department. But yeah, like you say, I think that it's really important to recognise where you did head off at the past a major catastrophe. Yeah. IT people are busy keeping the lights on all day. The business, and understandably so, sometimes forget that. And I think it's important to kind of emphasise that message. But in terms of big programs of delivery, big projects, those kind of really long-term strategic pieces of work, I think it's hugely important to remind people of, hang on a minute, we nearly bought that application that actually is totally hopeless to us. It wouldn't meet our needs. We've got another application over here that we've actually already got. We just need some more licenses, or we just need to configure it in a different way or something like that. And there's your big saving. And I think when you're embroiled in it and when you are so busy, actually being able to kind of take that step back and work towards that IT strategy and that business strategy is so important. I still am pretty gobsmacked at how common it is to not have an IT strategy in an organization and not have a business strategy. I think that's something, I'll forever bang the drum about, is you should always be working towards that. And of course you should involve your BRMs in that. They're the ones who are bringing all of that data back from the business about where they want to go in the next year, in the next 10 years. Of course, lots of different things are going to happen within that time and you have to adjust and pivot. But yeah, contributing to that strategy, which really tells the story, doesn't it? This is our theory about where we want to be and where we're going to be in 10 years or 5 years. Can we get there? And then you fill in the gaps of the jigsaw piece in between. So yeah, like you say, all of the positives and all of the successes, but all of the near misses as well, definitely. Yeah.
I want to come back to strategy because that's an important something I want to mention there. But One of the things that I was really surprised about when we first got involved with BRM teams and developing or offering the training is that you consider companies of a certain size, they've got seriously smart people working for them. There's lots of people, all the bases should be covered. So everyone should be monitoring all the things that are important. And then we spoke to a few BRMs, and often one of the issues was resourcing. IT didn't have enough resources, didn't have enough money, didn't have enough people, didn't have, And so you'd say to them, okay, well, who's monitoring what they're doing? Who knows, all of the end goals? Do they all know, as you mentioned earlier, are we working on something that's delivering value? And one thing that surprised me is that even some of these big organizations that we work with, they don't have oversight of the whole portfolio. So you might have people that are tracking progress of specific projects and everyone knows how they're delivering against those. But as to whether all of these projects together, which ones are delivering the most value and where should we allocate resources, that didn't seem to be done so much, which really surprised me. And that's, again, something that BRMs, knowing what they know, calling on, their toolkits and their capabilities, the skill sets, they know those questions to ask where, what might be obvious to some people is not obvious to others. So having those guys in there asking the questions, I think is really important.
Definitely. And I think that, again, when I think back to a role in particular that I've done where I would consider it to be high level BRM maturity, the general feeling in terms of interaction with my IT colleagues was that I could call on anyone at any time. I could ping anyone a Teams message and it probably wouldn't take at most an hour or two, maybe a day if somebody was really busy or something was going on. But I could kind of get almost instantaneous feedback. And that was hugely powerful. And that could often be about resource. So I could ping a project manager and say, like, this project's red. It's been we're concerned about it. It's a high priority. What is our return to green plan? What are we going to do? What are the resources they're getting pinched that we can't lean on to kind of make sure that this is as successful as it can be? And I kind of come back to having a really strong PMO as well, having those people who are the setup that we had was we had the entire business requirements pipeline in SharePoint, so it was visible to pretty much the entire IT organization and members of the business if they wanted. So almost anyone in the organization could see what the topics were that were kind of next in the queue, what the projects were. We had a very strong project dashboard as well in Power BI. So having that kind of oversight that you talked about, Mark, it was there for almost anyone to see. And the business partners were heavily involved in updating that pipeline. So any data that I got, I could instantly put it into a SharePoint item. I could change a date. I could write a note about a concern around a potential escalation or something like that. And it was almost instantaneous a lot of the time. And I would definitely encourage people to kind of go down that route. The more visible you can make your pipeline to as many people as possible, the better, really, because that just means that everybody is kind of contributing and asking those questions. You might have the business kind of doing that prioritization for you. You might have somebody in the business looking at something that's just about to go red and go, oh, hang on a minute, I can do something to stop that from going red. Or there were times even when the business had people that could actually fill a resource gap for us, which again was kind of completely unexpected. You just assumed that the IT department are the only ones who can kind of fix that problem, when the business actually said, well, hang on a minute, we've got some developer IT expertise within the business, we can lend you some of ours. There's always potentially many ways to solve a problem, and I think having that, it really does have that collaborative effect. And so my advice for sure would be make your pipeline as visible as possible, especially in big complex organizations. But at the end of the day, what have the IT department got to hide? Our pipeline is the business's pipeline at the end of the day. We're there to help them. So if we can kind of get that roadmap into a live SharePoint site or whatever it may be, that's accessible for everyone, well, surely that's going to save us lots of time and effort and heartache in being able to make those tweaks and adjustments and keep everything on track. So that's something that I've seen work really, really well. And I would encourage anybody to kind of crack on with that as soon as they can. Yeah.
And I definitely think it encourages business ownership of these things as well, because when it comes to the crunch, you've got normally it's whoever shouts loudest gets the action. But when business has to argue amongst themselves and say, okay, my project needs to take priority and this is why, they have to know about the project. They've really got to be involved in it and, take ownership of it, have it under control. And then they could be in a position to argue why that should take priority. And if it doesn't, it's not IT's responsibility to try and justify something then, which they're not, really in the best position to do.
Definitely. And I think one of the really powerful effects that can have is, so take budget setting time of year, for example. Typically what would happen is you'd end up with a kind of a demand list of multi-million pounds. I mean, you could be into double figures quite easily, genuinely. If the business have got access to that, what they can very quickly do is cleanse that for you. So they can bring a multi-million pound pipeline right the way down to, I don't know, £1.5 million or something like that very, very quickly. Or they might spot an item that has been on your pipeline for 3 years and say, hang on a minute, why on earth have you got that on your demand list? We don't even know what that is. Like, that can't genuinely be a requirement of ours. And, you can sift out all of the mess, if you like. So you don't even have to do that. The business can kind of do that for you. And again, I think that's something where, if you want to feel better about life, if you reduce a demand pipeline from 100 items to 50 or 60 or whatever it may be overnight, well, that definitely makes everyone feel better about life, because your dashboard of resource will very quickly look much nicer, and it just kind of restores people's faith that actually, they're not completely stretched and not going to fail because they can't resource it properly and can't deliver. They're actually going to see a much prettier picture. Yeah, of course it's going to be tight. We have to stretch ourselves, but actually it looks far more achievable once you've condensed that pipeline and sifted out all of the things that you didn't realise weren't important.
Yeah. Just going back to the IT strategy you mentioned. So we've seen in companies we work with where they have an IT strategy that the CIO has come up with, and it's totally divorced from the business strategy. There's been no correlation, no overlap whatsoever. So they have a nice strategy, they know exactly where IT is going as a internal organization, but it doesn't really marry up with the business. And what we've always tried to say is that you shouldn't really have a separate IT strategy. You should have a business strategy with a kind of technology and information angle. What's your experience with that?
I must admit, Mark, I think that the IT strategy, as much as I've contributed towards it, I still feel like it's a tough nut to crack in terms of having that kind of really involved, deep BRM contribution towards it. I still feel like that's something that I'm really motivated to kind of be better at, or kind of I guess kind of influence, should I say. I feel like you can speak to senior IT leaders day in, day out, week in, week out, but ultimately being able to shape and influence that IT strategy is still the biggest challenge. In my experience, many organizations just simply don't even have one. And I understand why in some cases. I think a lot of people are too scared to publish a strategy and it be out of date. So, within a month, basically, because of how quickly times move. But I think that's where you involve the business in developing that strategy. If it's their info, their feedback, they're telling you which direction they want to head in. I mean, I've worked for organizations that have got an order book that's more than 50 years long. Right. So they pretty much know where they're going. They know that it's going to be a windy road along the way. But I do think that BRMs, in my experience, and 8 years of experience, I'm sure there's plenty who've cracked it. I still feel that's something where I can kind of contribute more, definitely. Having a strategy that really looks like where we want to be, and kind of that kind of theory of where we should be and want to be. I feel like probably getting elbows out a little bit more, and kind of I still get nervous when I talk to C-suite staff, don't get me wrong, But I think that you always fall back on that confidence that you have, that what you're saying is what you've captured from the business. Yeah. I've been really lucky that I honestly can't think of a stakeholder that I've worked with in the business who's not been passionate and not been willing to dedicate their time in telling me their story and really making me put myself in their shoes. Yeah. I've worked with organisations where I've felt like I'm them, where I'm doing their job and I'm experiencing the problems that they've got, and you end up just being as frustrated and as passionate as them. And I think it's the BRM's role to really take that back into the IT department and use it to influence and shape that strategy. I think that's for my kind of next BRM role. That is something that I'm really going to focus on, is making sure that those senior IT leaders and the C-suite really understand what that IT strategy should look like, and then go out and be brave and publish it and talk about it. If it's totally wrong, the business will, give you some banter about it, but they won't kick you for it, because they'll say, at least you tried, but actually this is what it should look like. And so I think that's hugely important. I really do. And I think that's something that evolves over time. But one thing that I do quite religiously is anything that I capture from the business, I usually stick in OneNote. Then it's there if you like to share around with anybody. And sometimes it's not even the big things. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. It could just be a 1 or 2 sentence nugget of information that you share with a senior leader somewhere that actually can have a profound impact on the organisation. And sometimes it's just did you know that such and such over there is doing this and it's really amazing and they're really happy with it and you should really do it and we can deploy it to you in like a week. Like just but it's also that kind of much longer term story. Like, did you know such and such has been trying to fix this problem for 3 years and we've still not cracked it? We really ought to have a strategy that is going to fix this problem. So I think that's something where I had some successes in the past, but I think if I started a new BRM role today, I think the first thing I would be saying is, let's tackle this strategy problem. If you've got one, great. How can we kind of ensure that it's continually updated and it's improved all the time? If you've not got one, we really ought to have one, and pretty quick, So yeah, that definitely resonates as well.
Great. So when we first got involved with BRM training and we went out and met BRM teams, one of the things we loved is that just they seemed like a great bunch of people. So the one thing that we have noticed, that I think being that kind of person who wants to get along with everyone and wants to make things work, you have a lot of good times and good relationships, but there can be some really bad times, and we've seen some BRMs that have really struggled, and it's not because of what they're doing, because they have great success with some business partners but not with others. Have you experienced that there's been times where you just really thought, oh, why am I doing this? So where's the escape hatch?
Yeah. More often than you might think, to be honest, Mark. I think that, I've been in scenarios where very, very senior people have been very, very cross about something. But most of the time, those scenarios have been because I've encouraged IT colleagues to get something out in the open that we're worried about. And I think if somebody's really, really cross about something, certainly it means that they're passionate about it, but it also means that at the end of it, you're probably going to get the clarity on the way forward. I've been at meetings before where I've said a prayer before I go in there, and I've known that it's going to be rough, and I know that I'm going to be sweaty and red and, stuttering and kind of panicking. But I've always known that it's coming from the right place and it's coming from the business, and that if we get it right, it's going to be a massive deal. Yeah. And I've also been in situations where I felt like I've been slogging away month after month. There's been blockers in the way, whether that be processes or tools or people or resource or whatever. And you just feel like it's really heavy going and you're not going to get there. Thankfully, towards the end of those things, when you're just about ready to give up, something is clicked one way or another. It's usually, I think, it's a BRM thinking about tackling something in a different way, or leaning on the BRM community. Well, I really must hold my hands up. As you know, Mark, I'm in between roles at the moment. And one thing that I have fallen back on in my kind of moment of mini crisis is the BRM community. And this is not just a plug because I'm talking to you either. I promise you, I joined a BRM Europe call a couple of weeks ago, And it just kind of reminded me of how important that collaboration is. If the business were working in silos, we would be the first people criticizing them, saying, oh, they really shouldn't be working in silos. They should be sharing the knowledge and the love across the teams and everything. The BRM community is absolutely no different. You've got so many people there who have been there and got the t-shirt and kind of give you little tips and tricks and advice and kind of get you out of that hole, really, which we've all been in, more than once. And it was just lovely to see people who were kind of really engaged and really still had that faith in BRM. I don't think I've ever met anybody who genuinely doesn't think BRM is a good thing to do. I have met people though who think it's a really easy decision when cost cutting's happening or budget restrictions are happening to kind of just do away with the BRM function. I've been in organisations where they've been trying to figure out where BRM sits, and actually in that scenario, I was myself with 8 years of experience, a colleague with 13 years of experience, and we were kind of sat there going, why don't you just ask us? Like, we can tell you. We're here. You don't have to kind of spend hours trying to figure it out. We should be in that strategic space. And I think Germany said it on the call last week. As a BRM, you will work with almost every single person in that IT department, regardless of seniority, regardless of specialism. But ultimately, you should be in that strategic space. I've worked with brilliant service managers who help to just kind of keep the tickets going through, help to kind of solve those problems, help to make sure that your standard requests are taken care of really nicely and smoothly, and some non-standard requests as well. And they're like gold because they free up so much of that time for you to be able to go and do BRM. But yes, for sure, you've got to be working strategically. You've got to be working with your enterprise architects, with your senior leaders, and I think if you're in that space, it's much easier going. I think if you are trapped in that kind of operational ticket chasing routine, that can be really tough to get out of, and you have to really be brave and really shout about it and say, come on folks, this isn't right. You're not using me to your full potential. If you need a service manager, get a service manager. If you need some more people working on service desks, go for that. But this is what your BRM can do. And that's where you said it before, leaning on those examples of success and failures is so important to kind of really illustrate and paint the picture about how effective BRM can be. My most recent experience where the business partnering function was curtailed very quickly, the conversations that I've had with the business was super promising. They were so keen to share the challenges and the issues, but also the solutions about how we could get there. I mean, I had one conversation for an hour with a lady who told me almost their entire application landscape, how everything integrated together, where things were broken, how many licenses they had, when they were due for renewal, what other things needed fixing, whether it be from an infrastructure perspective or genuinely anything. That was from like 1 hour. And I just felt like I could kind of go away, produce a roadmap and say, look, I think this is where we need to get. It might not be perfect. So if you imagine having 50 hours, 100 hours of the business, imagine what you could do genuinely. It blows my mind to think about how powerful understanding that business capability and the business need. That's something that I think is really important. When I've worked closely with enterprise architects, the really good ones have focused on business capability. Right. What business capability have the business got today? What gaps have they got, and how do we bridge that? And it sounds simple, but I've also worked with enterprise architects who've got really good tools to kind of bring that into a really nice picture to share with the business and share with the IT department, which can make it so much easier to understand and really bring it to life and really kind of get that energy amongst people. And I think, that BRM doesn't have to take years to kind of get going and have a positive impact. Like I say, I had a conversation with one stakeholder for an hour. She was so passionate and so happy for me to be there. And she understood my role better than I did. She understood the impact that BRM could have. So, I would say to any senior person thinking about adopting a BRM function, go and do it, If you've got inexperienced BRMs, partner them up with experienced ones, and so you can kind of diffuse that experience and knowledge, and that will really help to give you those kind of quick wins and that short-term impact, whilst also taking you on that journey to a kind of much larger, longer-term impact and investment and benefits. So, I think it's a complex world out there, but I'm definitely never going to neglect the BRM community again. In my moment of need, they very definitely come to my rescue, and I would say to anybody out there, if you ever want to speak to me about something, I might not be able to fix the problem, but I genuinely believe a problem shared is usually a problem halved. And even some of the kind of the simplest things that you kind of might not have thought about, just having that chat, I kind of take it for granted. Actually, I think, I know everything about BRM because I'm a BRM. Of course I do. It's like rugby or golf or whatever. I know loads about it, not a problem. But actually, half an hour with people who are doing the same job can make a massive difference. So we're really lucky that we've got that community there to lean on, and we've got as you know, Mark, I'm going to finally get around to doing my CBRM. Hopefully by the end of the year, if not the first month of next year. Again, I know that I will learn loads from that and kind of think, oh my goodness, I've been doing that for how long, and I've been doing it wrong. I think it will hugely benefit my career and my interactions with my business stakeholders.
It's like so many other things. I mean, I thought I could snowboard, I thought I could ride a bike. It's not until you go and have a lesson with someone because you want to go to the next stage, and they're like, hang on a minute, you don't know what you're doing. And so you have to go back from scratch, and it's difficult because you have to become a beginner again. I mean, it is tough, but then when you're taught the right way to do things, it opens up a whole world of opportunity. Bring that out. I was really, when we actually ran our first class, it was here in South Africa, and we went to a company, and they had a BRM function, 10 years old. So some of the people in the room were quite new, others have been around 10, 12 years, and I was in the room. I wanted to be there for the first class. And I was thinking, what are we going to teach these people? I mean, they've been doing this for years. We've just, we've got some experience. We've obviously got this great material and content in the institute. But what are we going to teach these people? But it was the same thing. They'd been doing their version of BRM, which was very transactional in some cases, not very strategic. And so as we're going through the class, light bulbs popping all over the place. So they're getting very excited about what they can do with it. And you have to be kind of aware of your environment. So just because something sounds like a good idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. So you have to kind of be aware of what's already going on. But it was great to see that with this, this broad knowledge base, but there's just so much you can give these people to go and be able to do their job better, and ultimately deliver more value to the business.
Definitely. One thing I would just kind of expanding on that, one thing I would encourage BRMs to do, if you don't already, is keep a notebook of all of your kind of successes and ideas from other BRMs as well, because I think that when you share those with people, also to kind of keep you going as well, like you said earlier, Mark, when things are a slog, if you've won an award for something as a team, or if a stakeholder said that something was really good and it made them more productive and it saved them money and it delivered a contract earlier, or it saves them pain, for goodness sake, capture that, copy and paste it, anonymize it, of course, if you need to. But I think that we forget sometimes that we're actually often doing quite a good job. And like you said, those light bulb moments do happen. I was part of a team not that long ago that delivered basically a machine learning AI solution for around safety. And it was one of the easier projects I've ever worked on. I had a super bright, super business passionate data scientist who had kind of sowed the seed and heard about some requirements and realized that she could quite easily, well, not quite easily, maybe easily for her anyway, develop and deliver a solution for the business. And lo and behold, fast forward a few months, it was delivered pretty much on time, to budget, and the impact within the business was huge. And that was the feedback from the business, not from me. The most challenging part of that was making sure that the requirements were absolutely crystal clear, so that we were sure that we were on the same page and we were sure we were delivering the best solution. I mean, that, like I say, was one of the easiest projects I've ever been involved in. And, it won an award. And that solution is probably going to be copy and pasted into lots of other business areas. And that can really catch you by surprise sometimes. You can pour your heart and soul into something for years, and by the end of it feel a little bit deflated because for one reason or another, you just didn't quite get there. Times have changed, the goalposts have shifted, people have moved on, all of these things can happen when you're working on long-term projects. But sometimes it's the ones that really catch you out and you think are going to be really difficult that actually are the ones that win the sort of the gold star at the end of the day. So I think if you do have moments like that, for goodness sake, record it and take it around with you. At the least it will help you with is if you need a job, you can put it in front of somebody on their desk and say, look, these are all the great things that I've done. But you should really remind yourself of what you're doing out there, because you do have to have tough conversations with people. Sometimes the business do feel like you've let them down for one reason or another, and you have to really understand why. And you really have to, I've never met a BRM who won't feel bad about that and be sorry that for whatever reason it's not worked out. Sometimes even when you have escalations, you can't fix the problem. It doesn't matter which senior person you get involved or which bit of resource you lean on or however much money you throw at it. Sometimes no matter what you do, you cannot fix that problem, and you just have to be honest about that. And I think you just have to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, we have to move on. For whatever reason it's not worked out, what can we do differently next time? Or how can we kind of tweak this solution or tweak your maybe de-scope some things so that we can actually deliver that benefit for you. But you really, I would really encourage people to do that. And if you've done a BRM customer satisfaction survey in the past, of course, use all of that data, because that is going to be live feedback on where you need to improve. And that's your leverage back into the IT department about how you can do things better. And like I said at the beginning of the call, Mark, I've never met anybody who doesn't in IT who doesn't want to make things better. So that would be my other bit of advice is for all of your wins, make sure you record them for the dark times, definitely.
Just going back to the IT guys with I'm just thinking as we're talking, when we first got involved in this, we saw BRM immediately as like the marriage guidance counsellor, but also the translator.
Yeah.
So you've got someone who can sit in the middle, because it just surprises me even to this day that business and IT just don't seem to be able to talk to each other. I think they want to, it's not like they don't want to. It's just like in some cases, a different language. And when you're so heavily entrenched in something, you don't realize, that you are talking a different language. I mean, something that's kind of run of the mill to an IT person is total jargon and gobbledygook to someone else. So having that person that can sit in the middle, the BRM, I think is really, really so important, because it just enables that communication. And I was thinking as we were speaking earlier, it's maybe a bit of a controversial thought, but the BRM role, and Jeremy mentioned this actually in his one, is that the BRM role is maybe a transitional role. The capability is what's so important. The role itself is just a way of getting you there. So I guess another way of showing your success is that you have got IT and business to a point where they can just talk to each other and you don't need to be involved as often. So you're doing yourself out of a job effectively, but that's another measure of success, I would say.
I totally agree with you, Mark. And I think the thing that helps me to sleep at night in terms of that is I genuinely don't think there will be a time where big chunks of the IT department and big chunks of the business can talk to each other like that, one-to-one or however many, I think that would do me out of a job. I don't ever think it will happen. Till the end of time. I think that's why BRM is so important, is you have that person who spends time living and breathing what the business are doing. And what I've been in scenarios where I've had a conversation with somebody and I've not seen them again for 8 weeks, but that conversation was so helpful in helping me to kind of nurture that idea or that requirement within the IT department, that when I saw that person again and we'd made progress on that problem or that challenge, it had, it brought the organisation on a huge amount, because I had felt it. I'd felt what that pain was like, and I could be that translator back into the business. Likewise, on the flip side of that, I've been in meetings where IT people are talking IT jargon, and I've sat there going, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So if I don't, how can you expect the business to? And I know what that project is. I know what we're trying to deliver, and I still don't understand what you're talking about. How are we ever going to get anywhere? I genuinely think that would be where I didn't have a job and where BRMs don't. But I think that's mission impossible. I don't think that kind of translating, connecting. I mean, you've got to love talking. My wife, when I'm at home working from home, she says, goodness me, like, you never stop talking. You never get off the phone. And she says I'm far too loud as well. She also laughs that I do relationship stuff. Like when she looks at our marriage and how much of a nightmare I probably am, she just cannot believe it. But talking is the most important thing. Sending people chat messages. Have you got 5 minutes for a chat? I'm just really not sure of something, or I need some clarity, or I need to run something by you. And by and large, most of the organisations I've worked for, people are only too happy to kind of dedicate their time to it. And I think when you then diffuse that and you sort of say to that IT person, did you know that this person in the business has told us that, I don't know, that Wi-Fi that they needed, we actually only need one switch, or that application that we're looking to deliver, we've already got it, or there's this really good one on the market, we should definitely get a demo, or whatever. Ultimately then building up towards that bigger strategy, I think that's absolutely huge. And I think that kind of constant toing or froing, where you've built those really strong relationships, and I think what does come with experience is not being scared when you do meet a stakeholder for the first time and they are really cross, and you do think it's going to be a real tough relationship and a real tough nut to crack. I think as a BRM, you just know that eventually you will get there. You just have faith, and you just know that if you can demonstrate to that person you understand the problem, then you're halfway there. Then the real challenge is delivery. Are we going to get there? And I think if you're not going to get there, tell the business as soon as you know, as soon as you possibly can. And if you do have to have uncomfortable conversations with people in a room or in a meeting, or however you do it, get it out in the open. Again, there's no point sitting on something. The real power is kind of getting to those roots, those root causes of the problems. And I think like you said, Mark, I think that connection between the business and IT and talking the same language is something that you will always need a BRM for, definitely. I've seen it with other BRMs, HR, BPs, BRMs, finance. They're of exactly the same ilk. They have that ability to turn something that means that only something to a small amount of people into something really deep and something that's kind of really rich in terms of colour and story. I think that we'll always need BRMs for that, and helping to kind of develop that strategy, but really kind of give it some speed and some miles per hour, on that journey. And I think that my experience, when a strategy exists, it talks to every person in an organization, whether they're on the front line or whether they're the CEO. I think it's something that people really want to get behind, and it helps them to kind of come to work and kind of go, oh yeah, that's what it's going to look like in 3 years. Or, I think that you really cannot put a price on that. Definitely. Yeah.
We set an analogy of a guy laying bricks, not really knowing why, and then the guy laying bricks knowing it's going to be part of a cathedral or something. The motivation, the will, everything that goes along with it. It just makes such a huge impact.
I've been in. I totally agree with that, Mark. And I've been working on topics where, depending on what you talk to, a day late could cost you anywhere from 300 grand to £1 million. And like that, you know, there's again, that's a big range. I'm sure somebody on the call will go, well, that's a bit vague. But that's quite a big jump, but it is vague for a reason, and I think when you sort of explain to people that like, this is why we're doing something, and then actually, if you need to invest 50k in a role, but ultimately it's going to save you £1 million, that's quite an easy decision to make.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's just kind of cold hard facts that can kind of scare you, but if you can fix on, I mean, I've supported submarines, I've supported students with their education, I've supported security systems that will make us safer and make it easier for our loved ones to sleep better at night. I think when you tell that story, and you explain to somebody, this is why you're laying those bricks, this is why you're doing that horribly painful coding, or why it was such a big deal that delivery was late, or on that network kit, or I think that's where it really kind of comes to life and where it really inspires people. Most of the time, the people that are working for these organisations applied for that job because they really wanted to work there, and if they feel like they're contributing to that, that longer term goal, that really puts a spring in people's step and really kind of helps to wear down any kind of resistance.
Absolutely agreed. So I've just noticed the time, so it's been a great chat. It's been really wonderful talking to you, actually, James. I've really enjoyed this session. As I did with Jeremy, I'm really keen to know if you have any kind of final thoughts that you can share with people listening. So
I think that one thing that I would say, and I probably touched on it earlier, Mark, but certainly now in my kind of time of mini crises, when you have these moments, you are tempted to kind of look around and go, hang on a minute, do I want to be an IT project manager? And again, I think that's a great role, no criticism of that at all. Or do I want to do something a little bit different? And I've never been more sure that BRM is the way forward for me, and of the impact that it could have. And if I was sat there talking to a CEO or somebody who just joined a company on their first day, I would definitely still be banging the drum about BRM, about what it can do, and I would be happy sharing those examples of what it can do. I think when you first get going, even yourself, you kind of struggle to kind of understand how it can have an impact. But I mean, one of the most powerful topics I was ever involved in was regarding a legacy system, and it was probably going to be a 5-year project, multi-million pounds, and basically almost change the way the organisation worked entirely. That's how big it was, and I think that's where BRM, certainly from what I could tell, was going to make a huge difference. It was going to involve multiple BRMs, multiple specialists across the entire organisation. I mean, we had sponsors right the way across the entire organisation, which was incredibly rare, because usually your topics don't spread that far. But that, I think, if you had a CIO kind of saying to you, well, why should I keep you on, or a CEO, that's the scenario where it really brings it to life and really hammers home. The other thing that I would say is, we talked about the BRM community and what that can do. I just kind of hope that continues to go from strength to strength, really. There will be, I hope, new BRMs listening to this, and I kind of think back to 8 years ago when I first started and was terrified and was kind of maybe even a little bit scared of talking to people. I was kind of pretty confident that I could do it and that I enjoyed it and was going to be good at it. But even then, you kind of sit there and think, well, I got a bit of a narky reaction from that person. They seemed a bit grumpy with me. Don't ever let that put you off. We all have our moments, don't we? Keep smiling, keep bouncing along. Yes, of course, when things aren't going well, ask people to help, lean on them. You've got so much experience. I mean, BRM isn't even really that old, is it, Mark? I don't think. I'm not too sure when it kind of first started, but certainly it was quite a new idea when I was a BRM for the first time. So it can't be that old, or maybe it is now. I don't know.
It's current, guys. It's quite new. It's been around for a long time, but this new kind of style, this new thinking is only 2014, 2015, around there.
Yeah, and I think if you are a CIO or a CEO, I mean, crikey, what their diaries look like and how much they're kind of, no matter how much planning they do, running from one thing to the next, putting out one fire to the next, and they're trying to think strategically all the time. I bet they're not finding much time to do it because of all the problems they're trying to solve. If your BRMs can kind of help you to change that and help you to, I've just got a gate crasher there. My son wanted to share his lolly with everybody on the call. I've not lost my train of thought, but yeah, that CEO or that CIO might not get to talk to those business stakeholders very often. And if you can kind of tell them, well, hang on a minute, I spoke to them last week and they were absolutely adamant that we're doing the wrong thing and we need to pivot and we need to change and we need to do it this way, surely that's going to make their life better and make them feel like they've got a better understanding of why we're not doing the right thing or why things are going so spectacularly wrong. So as I say, I couldn't be more of an advocate. If ever I needed to reflect on things and a bit of fresh energy behind me, I think that, this little hiccup in my career that's happened through no fault of my own, should I add. And if people need a business partner or a BRM, I'm having interviews at the moment, but please, if you want to have a chat, I promise you I'll do a good job and I'm dedicated. But yeah, I think that it's never been more important. Like, we know what's going on in the world. We know that times are hard for lots of people. People are having to make very, very tough decisions about their organisational structures. BRM has to be a part of that. Yeah. From small right the way up to large organisations. And I think you do realise that when you sit back and look at some of the successes that you've had, you realise that there's been a load of disasters that were part of that you've managed to pull out of the hat. So thanks ever so much for having me on, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be able to share some of my experiences and if anybody wants to, even experienced BRMs, like you said, Mark, I think they can still get a lot out of talking to other business partners and other people with other experiences. So onwards and upwards, hopefully. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I'm by no means a professional on this topic, but I think you're an archetypal BRM. So I wish you the very best of luck with your job search. And I'm sure something will come up very soon for you. But we'll obviously share your details, and anyone who wants to get in touch with you can either do it directly through LinkedIn or we'd be welcome to pass the details through.
Thanks ever so much, Mark. Thanks for having me on, and good luck with the podcast. I really enjoyed listening to Jeremy's, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Wonderful, lovely. Thanks so much.